عليكم جميعا. إنه لمن دواعي سرورنا أن نتواجد بالمرحلة الثانية للمنافسات العلمية. أنا رويدة وزميلي ميهفان طلاب جامعة كلية الصيدلة ومن خريجين هذا العام إن شاء الله. أهلا وسهلا بكم. أود في البداية أن أقدم خالص تعازينا لأهالي الشهداء وجميع العراقيين بسبب أحداث التي حصلت في زاخو. نسأل الله تعالى أن يرحمهم وأن يسكنهم فسيح جناته.
أحسنتي.
موضوعنا اليوم هو عبارة عن موضوع مشوق وجميل الذي هو اكتشاف وتطوير الأدوية. ومن حسن حظنا أنه الجروب الأول والثاني كان شرحوا على نفس الموضوع، فأنطاكم فكرة عن الموضوع اللي نحن نريد نشرحه in general إن شاء الله. Today we will take you in a little journey in our pharmacy field, drug discovery and development. We all have been touched by the miracles of the modern medicine, but only few people understand how pricey and time-consuming and how medicines are made. The mission is to make new medicines and to ensure that they are safe, effective for preventing and treating diseases. Drug development process includes several steps. The first one is the discovery stage, then preclinical research, clinical research, FDA review, and post-marketing safety monitoring. Drug discovery. The first phase of the drug discovery process is drug discovery. Now, Mehfan will tell us what do we mean by drug discovery, the first step in the producing the new medicine in the drug world.
Thank you so much there, Rowydah. So the first part, which is drug discovery. So actually, as we know, like any other discovery, how does discovery and inventions come into existence? The reason is that you face a problem, and to solve that problem, you have to find and discover a new way to solve that problem. So in case of drugs, in case of medications, medicines, the problem is disease, the problem is dysfunction. Okay, so what do we do? So what do pharmaceutical companies do and pharmacists? They discover a drug, and these drugs will work against that disease to correct that dysfunction in the body. And this is the actually drug discovery as a superficial point. So drug discovery is composed of several stages and points. Then, as we said, it's composed of several stages. So beginning with the first starting point of the drug discovery, we have to have like the starting point, which is target identification and validation for drugs to be discovered. As we know, we said we have a disease, but in order for drugs to come to existence, so we have to identify that target. The first point is to identify the target. And then we have targets and we have validated that target. But let's say, how do we discover drugs to interact with this target and to correct that dysfunction in the body? Actually, the reason is we have a high throughput screening, which will screen thousands of compounds, a technique which screens the different compounds, thousands of compounds against the target. And if there is interaction between both the target and the compounds, these compounds will pass successfully. And then these compounds are called hit compounds or hit series. Then hundreds of compounds will be hit series. Then later they undergo a little optimization to be lead compounds or what's called leading compounds. So leading compounds actually are better in improvement than hit compounds. They are leading compounds are actually compounds, chemical entities that have pharmacological activity and that are likely to produce therapeutic effects when they are taken into the body to produce therapeutic effect by interacting with the disease target. So after we have our leading compounds, now leading compounds undergo lead optimization. Intensive optimization and improvement in leading compounds will lead to development or discovery of the candidates or drug candidates, drug-like molecules. Then if you see that from thousands of compounds, we go to hundreds and then to dozens of compounds, and only 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 will be later just candidates to be later drugs in future. And now the drug development. So we discover the target, we discover drug, and we have drug-like molecules. Still, they are not drug yet. So let's go to development phase and how to improve that they are deserve to be drug or not. So my colleague Royda, could you please tell us what do you mean by development in preclinical and clinical trials?
Surely, drug development is the second step in the drug discovery and development process. It includes preclinical phase and clinical trials. In the preclinical, we use animals for testing, but in clinical trials, we use human being volunteers. Preclinical testing involves evaluation of drug safety and efficacy in animal species that conclude prospective human outcome. By preclinical testing, we can expect how this drug acts, by which mechanism in the human body. The preclinical trials can be conducted in two ways: general pharmacology, to know the action of the drugs, and toxicology, to know if it's safe or not. Preclinical testing assesses physicochemical properties, formulation design. If we have to prepare our drug candidate in tablet or capsule or syrup. As in vitro and in vivo assay. In vitro mean in lab, in vivo in living organism. Pharmacokinetics, pharmacological study, toxicity, because the step behind this step we have to use human beings. So we have to know the toxicity, the carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, reproductive toxicology in animal to be safe when we use this candidate drug on the human being. Does drug candidate really deserve to pass to clinical trials and to be tested in human volunteer? We have to do an investigation before we do clinical trials. We file to the FDA, which says investigational new drug application. It is a program filing the all information that we gathered and we file it to the FDA, Food and Drug Administration organization, to review and know if they approve to be done in the human being or not. Clinical trials mean using or testing the drugs on human being, on human volunteers. Now we will enter the clinical trial world. And Mehfan, what do we mean by clinical trials?
Actually, the clinical trials, as you said, we are testing drugs in human beings, so for further developments to be later released into market if they are really approved by FDA or regulatory authorities. So let's press the button and enter the world of the clinical trial. Clinical trials actually compose of several phases, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the importance of clinical trials is actually to a great degree in drug discovery and development phase, beginning with the phase 1, which actually involves the 20 to 100 healthy volunteers. Okay, so most of the time in phase 1 they use healthy volunteers, between 20 to 100 volunteers, and the aim of the phase 1 study actually mainly is to find out the safety of the candidates of drug-like molecules used in phase 1 in healthy volunteers. Almost 70% of the candidates pass the phase 1, okay, to the second phase. Of course, after the end of each phase, there must be an approval by regulatory authorities, and they have to accept it before passing and progressing to the next phase. Then the phase 2, which estimates its efficacy and safety. It involves a larger number of the patients, hundreds of patients, let's say, and will estimate the efficacy and the safety of the candidates. Then in this stage, actually, the main aim, as we said, is efficacy and safety estimation. But actually, we prepare the candidates for the phase 3, which is to actually find out the best safe doses that can be used in a larger population, because in phase 3 we have a very large population of the patient volunteers. So we find out in phase 2 the proper doses in relation to the efficacy, in relation to the safety of the candidates to be used by the larger population later in phase 3, of course, after the approval by regulatory authorities. As general, we say FDA, which is one of the great organizations in America. So 30% of the candidates pass into the next phase, phase 3. Then phase 3, which involves the largest number of patient volunteers in this trial. The drug is tested on different people to estimate its efficacy and safety on a wide variety of people, of patients, Then the phase 3, actually, after the end of the phase 3, after estimating efficacy and safety of these candidates, only, let's say, 1 from 5 candidates or 1 from 3 candidates passes into or receives approval from regulatory authorities from after phase 3. Because in phase 3, we have actually a form which has to be given or filled and given to be sent to the regulatory authorities. As we know, the issue of the drugs is a very sensitive issue. They are testing drugs on human beings or nothing else, and even in animals. So this NDA form contains all of the discoveries. NDA, which means new drug applications, contains all of the discoveries made at every stage of the process, from the starting point until the information all gathered during clinical trials, and is submitted to, we said, regulatory authorities, and as we say, FDA. Now, FDA will check and will review that file either to accept it or not. And my colleague Royda actually is going to give you more details about FDA review.
بعد ما انه خلصت ال 3 phases، phase 1 phase 2 phase 3، هسه الكومباني او الشركه المنتجه تريد تنزل دواها على سوق الادويه. فقبل ما تنزل دواها على سوق الادويه لازم انه يكون كل المعلومات مضبوطه كلها، يعني يصير لها ريفيو من الاف دي اي، المنظمه العالميه للغذاء والدواء الامريكيه، تسوي لها ريفيو من الفيس الاول اللي هي الديسكفري فيس لحتى الفيس 3 الكلينيكال ترايلز. They will review all the information the researcher gathered during each stage of the trial to determine if the drug will be approved. هذه العملية تأخذ من سنة إلى سنتين حتى ال FDA تنطي النتائج للشركة المصنعة إنه هذا الدواء راح يسمح بأن ينزل للسوق الأدوية أو لا يسمح. الفيس 4 البوست ماركتنج ريسيرش، يعني بعد ال FDA انطى الابروف الدواء راح ينزل للسوق من الشركة المنتجة. لكن هنا لازم نحن يعني نكون حريصين على أن نتابع الدواء المنزل حديثاً أو حتى الأدوية for chronic illness because the patient take it for long term. So يعني لازم نحن نكون حذرين جدا ونتابع الدواء المنزل للسوق، لأن هذا المريض اللي عنده مرض مزمن راح ياخذه على فترات طويلة ممكن من إلى عشرات السنين. فنحن نحاول إنه ما يكون عند الدواء side effect يعني يكون severe أو يسوي disability للبيشنت. لهذا لازم يكون عندنا المونيتورينج للأدوية، وهذا الفيس مو لكل الأدوية، فقط للأدوية المهمة والأدوية خاصة الأدوية for chronic illness. Drug development process. Could you please Mehfan tell us how much the cost and how long the time the drug development process will take?
Surely. Actually, because drug discovery and development is a very long process, and it costs too much on pharmaceutical industries. So simple in the pharmaceutical industries cannot do this process because the average cost on this process is actually about $1 billion, and the time spent over the overall process is for about 15 to 20 years. So it's really too much. And if you see that the number of compounds just is beginning from 10,000 or 15,000 until later only one compounds will be approved by the FDA as drug and will be released into market. Now, importance of drug discovery and development. This is a very important information actually for all of us. We say that why do we still need to discover and develop drugs? So there are many diseases that have no cure, example, cancer and HIV. And if you think that if we discover a drug, an anti-cancer drug, which will bring cure and hope to million of patients, of cancer patients, how much great is that? It's very good. So this is a very important process, and new medicines for newly appearing diseases like COVID-19, and developing already existing medications. For example, second generation antihistamines have lower side effects than first generation antihistamines. And improper data, another important information is improper data from clinical trials, or if steps are not done properly, the drug later may cause disasters. Thalidomide was one of the drugs used widely in 1950 or 1960, but later it was used as antiemetic, but later caused teratogenesis, malformations in the infants, and it caused it's called thalidomide tragedy, and it was a great issue of history we never forget. And finally, thank you very much for your presence, and hopefully you get a bit of information from it. The process of drug discovery brings hope, faith, and relief to billions of patients. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mehfan. Thanks, Royda. Are there any question, please? طبعا شكرا دكتور أسراء ودكتور أحمد للترجمة. حصلت لكم مترجمين فوريين.
شكرا.
دكتور إقبال، أهم خطوة لتطوير الدواء وشرط أساسي هو أن تكون له القابلية ذوبان في الدهون لكي يتسنى له اختراق جدار الخلية. السؤال، وين هو السؤال يا دكتور إقبال؟ هذه كانت مقدمة من دكتور إقبال، لكنه السؤال منتظره.
هذا السؤال دكتور.
نعم. دكتور أسراء, if the drug was very effective in the preclinical trial but not effective in the post.
Like many drugs have been very
What should we do?
Let's say a drug post preclinical trials or clinical trials but later they found that in market it causes adverse effects or many adverse drug interactions, which later may cause withdrawal of the drug from the market. We have many drugs. One of the drugs was thalidomide, as we said.
حسب نسحب الدواء إذا كان عنده سايد إفكت كلش قوي راح تنسحب، مثل الثاليدومايد كان يسوي الديفورميتي إذا عند البيبي، فسحب الدواء من السوق.
بالضبط.
يعني حسب السايد إفكت.
Can we modify it?
نعم دكتور.
دكتورة سارة تقول can we modify it?
thalidomide?
I think any drug.
تعتمد على الشركة المصنعة، إذا أرادت تكمل الديفلوبمنت أو تنسحب، وها هي تبقى على الشركة المصنعة اللي تأخذ القرار.
دكتور, another point is that because the cost of each single drug to be actually developed and to be released into market costs too much on the pharmaceutical industries. It's most of the time when they discover a drug and then later it's withdrawn from the market. This is a great disappointment for the pharmaceutical industry. They lose billions of dollars in this point, and maybe they lose hope. Or sometimes some companies try to make some modifications, some improvement for that compounds, to make new generations, to make new analogs, to decrease these adverse effects and to be later released into market.
Great. دكتور السيد زكي يقول في ناس طوروا لعلاج السرطان ولهم بحوث منشورة في مجلات الكيوان. أكيد الموضوع جدا مهم.
نعم دكتور.
دكتور السيد يقول إنه في كثير ناس طوروا لعلاج أمراض السرطان، وهناك الكثير من البحوث اللي منشورة من ضمن مجلات الكيوان اللي هي توب الجورنالز، الساينتفك جورنالز.
نعم دكتور، يعني أكيد لأنه الاكتشاف الأدوية والتطويرها مستمرة. But the point is that is it approved? We cannot so surely say it's approved. So until later it become approved and being released into market, into the world, so later we can say we have a cure for cancer.
دواء الثايلومايد؟ ثايلومايد. كل التوفيق رويدة، كل التوفيق ميهفان. أنا شهادتي بكم مجروحة يمكن من شهر الواحد 2020 أول مرة شفتكم لما كنتوا طلاب يمكن صف الثالث أو الرابع، فالله يبارك فيكم وإن شاء الله المستقبل الرائع لكم وزملائكم.
شكرا دكتور، ونحن نتشكر.